It's time for Drummer Nation. As the drummer for the Count Basie Orchestra, Butch Miles became renowned for his imagination, swinging big band style, and relentless energy. He's also worked with legends Sammy Davis Jr., Dave Brubeck, Mel Torme, Ella Fitzgerald, Woody Herman, and many other jazz greats. He was honored by the Texas State Senate and has been inducted into the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Conn-Selmer Institute and awards from Zildjian, Ludwig, and the International Association of Jazz Educators. He is currently a faculty member in jazz studies at Texas State University in San Marcos. My guest, Butch Miles, after this. The former Crescent Vanguard series are now widely available as part of the legendary Sabian HH models. HH cymbals are traditionally hand-hammered into shape and sound by Sabian craftsmen. Each cymbal receives between 2,000 and 4,000 hammer blows, resulting in increased musicality, tonal complexity, and unmatched sonic texture favored by drummers in the know for generations. Find out more about the Vanguard series and all other Sabian models at Sabian.com. Sound Synergy's percussion care lubricants and conditioners include a series of 3 products for total drum kit care and maintenance. Pedal Lube, the only product specifically designed for bass drum, hi-hat pedals, and triggers, as well as all moving metal parts and drum hardware, safely removes grit, grime, and other contaminants while protecting against harmful friction wear. Cymbal Care restores and conditions cymbal surfaces without strippers or harmful polishes. Stick marks and fingerprints virtually disappear, while branded ink logos and the cymbal's naturally aged patina are left intact. Wear Barrier is a conditioning formula for all drum heads, rims, and even sticks that prevents excess wear and maximizes sound quality. Every percussion care product complies with all USA air quality and safety requirements. Percussion care products in your gig bag ensures your entire kit will always look and sound its best. For more information, including a detailed video explaining the science behind Sound Synergy's products, check out their website at soundsynergies.net.
Hi, this is Stanton Moore. I've been playing and teaching drums for over 30 years. Growing up in New Orleans, I was fortunate enough to have some of the greatest drum mentors and teachers in the world. Because of this lineage, I'm as passionate about teaching drums as I am about playing, and have written multiple award-winning drum books and DVDs. Recently, I decided to modernize my approach to teaching, where my students can have access to my latest ideas and I can finally answer all the questions I get about drumming, gear, and more. My new site, Stanton Moore Drum Academy, is the perfect online drum learning platform for any level drummer to learn how to play the drums the same way I did, with the advantage of having me road test the material on hundreds of stages, countless clinics, lessons, and masterclasses, and dozens of studio sessions every year. Subscribe now and get ready to make serious progress on the drums. Imagine how much you can learn in just a month or 2. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you as subscribers on the site, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Butch Miles, thank you so much for doing my show. It's an honor for me. How are you?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you very much for asking me.
Well, I go way back with you. I don't know that you would know this, but I think I first saw you at a clinic in Dallas, Texas in 73 or 4 at a drum shop there. I don't even know the name of it anymore.
Yes, I remember. It was an afternoon clinic, I believe. Yes, I do recall that. It was delightful. I was thrilled to do it, and I'm kicking myself right now. Sometimes I've got senior moments when it comes to memory. I remember the drum shop very, very well, and I can't remember the name. I just remember it was run by a brother and a sister, I believe, and they were just the nicest people in the world.
Well, that was the first time I heard you. I was a student in North Texas, and a bunch of us got in a car and drove down there to catch you. And then the next time I saw you was one of the best concerts of my life. I'm 62 and I've seen a million concerts. But what this was at one of the big hotels in Miami Beach, and you were with the Basie band. And it was the Dorville or forgetting the names of the hotels there. But the show was, you came out with the Basie band and did like 45 or 50 minutes. Then there was a little break, and Billy Eckstein came out and did like an hour with the Basie band. And then there was a little break, and Sammy Davis did his show with the Basie band.
Well, that was the Doral.
Doral, there it is. Now, I know that Duffy Jackson was playing with Sammy, and you were playing with Basie, but who did Billy Eckstein's show? That's what I thought. Yeah.
That was me. Yeah, B just used the the entire band, but Bobby Tucker was Bee's conductor and pianist, and so he would come in and play the show and conduct the show. Bobby Tucker was one of those great unsung heroes. He didn't have a whole lot of gigs in his life. He worked for a couple of okay known singers like Billy Eckstine and Lady Day.
Oh, wow. So he was the MD for Mr. B?
He was wonderful. He was just wonderful. He used to call rehearsals for Eckstein. He would call our rehearsals like at noon, and he would tell Billy that we were set for 1 o'clock. Because he always showed up early, and as soon as he did, he disrupted the rehearsal. It was over with laughing and joking and running and just having a great time.
Well, that's the way it's supposed to be, right?
It was. That was really the way it turned out.
Well, I was a kid. I was like 18, 19. I was in heaven. I heard the Basie band. I was really into big bands, and you played all this Chestnuts, and Little Darlin', and then Sammy killed me, Birth of the Blues, and all that stuff. But I still remember it as one of the greatest concerts I ever went to. So let's back up a little before that. Anybody listening to you play would think that perhaps you had really been mentored by maybe Gene and Buddy. Was that a fair assessment?
It was, if you consider the mentoring a great deal of my listening to all the recordings.
That's what I meant, yeah.
I saw Gene twice live. And of course, I saw Buddy I saw Buddy when I was about 16 or 17. I was a senior in high school, and our high school band was marching in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I think it was 1960. And I organized a small group to wander around Manhattan. Being from West Virginia originally, of course, I knew nothing about Manhattan, but I'm the guy that's going to say, we're going here, we're going there, we're going to hear this band and this group. Wound up with my date at Birdland with a double bill of Buddy Rich and his sextet, Maynard Ferguson's big band, featuring Rufus Speedy Jones, I had never heard of.
Well, you used to play with Basie, right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He sure did. So I was getting a real education that night, but I had been watching Buddy, listening to Buddy ever since I was in my teens. And of course, Gene was my first, what do you want to call, drum hero. He was my drum god. I wanted to be like Gene Krupa. I wanted to do everything like Gene Krupa. Look like him, sound like him. That didn't work out. Neither one.
Well, ultimately, we can only sound like who we are, no matter how much you try to copy your great heroes. But to even do justice to that, either of those guys, you had to have a lot of technique, and you have great hands. How did you develop that?
That's a very good question, Michael. I'm not exactly sure. My instructor in Charleston, West Virginia, was at a private music store. His name was Frank Thompson, and he came from a jazz and an R&B background. Frank could set a groove like nobody's business. I mean, you could not help but start to move a little bit, or move your head or snap your fingers when Frank would play, pat your foot. The technique, he didn't have a lot of technique. So at that time, I was listening to a lot of people like Buddy Rich, and in the early to middle 60s, the big name all around was the Dave Brubeck Quartet. And you had Joe Morello and his 17 left hands.
Yeah, he had amazing chops, too.
Oh,
The first clinic I ever saw was 1967. It was Joe Morello. But go on.
I went to a couple of Morello's clinics, but his style and his sound, he got such a great sound out of the drum set, and his technique just blew me away, and I loved it. And I tried to copy a lot of his technical prowess, none of which I was able to ever get anywhere close to his speed and his beauty. But I stole as much as I could, and I worked on it with finger control and finger technique, and I was heavily into the rudiments. I used to start my practice periods by going through then the 26. I know it's laughable because we've got 40, but then there were 26 rudiments, and I would start them open, close, open, and I would go through all of them before I would even start to practice anything else. That was my warm-up. On a good day, that would take me about 15 to 20 minutes.
So you got the groove from your teacher, right? But how did you intuit all that stuff, the finger technique, and how did you figure that out?
Well, Frank was literally the only teacher I ever had. I'm fortunate, Michael, in that I can I'm a good imitator. I do accents very easily. I can switch in and out of all sorts of accents, you know, German, Japanese, Spanish, French. It's just easy because my ear is like that. And because I listened to so many recordings when I was growing up, I was able to hear phrases that the drummers were playing, and I could steal those. To this day, I still play a 4-bar break that I heard Buddy play back when I was about 16, note for note. My thing was that I liked it very clean. I was never a sloppy drummer, and I really liked a clean technique. I like to be able to hear everything, and I just worked on it to my own satisfaction. It was something that I felt I had to do. I didn't have anybody standing over me saying, "Do it again, do it again." I did it again, and did it again, and did it again. There was one summer. I know this sounds outrageous, but there was one summer that when I was in high school, my folks owned a, a house, a small house with a basement. And my mother would go to work. Everybody would go out except my grandmother, who would stay home, and she was hard of hearing. So around 9 o'clock or so in the morning, I would go downstairs in the basement where I had the drums set up in a little stereo, a portable stereo, and I would practice until around lunchtime. And I'd have some lunch, then I'd go back and I'd practice again until people came home from work. So I was putting in anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day that entire summer. And it apparently paid off because I did clean. I really wanted the technique to be clean.
Well, I hear today when I listen to you, I hear very clean, crisp, well-articulated phrases. It's a hallmark of your style, I would say. So how did you get rolling in New York? This is before you got with the Basie band, I presume.
I was with Mel Torme, and I was seeing a young lady that lived in New York. And one thing led to another. It's a long story, but I'll shorten this up. Mel and I parted company in December of 1974. And I called around to see if I could get some interviews or some auditions with a few people. I auditioned for Peter Nero, which was great fun for me, but apparently I didn't fit him at all because I'd been working with Mel for 3.5 years with big bands. And it was hard for me to work on the concept of Peter with the, I mean, he's so great. He could sit out there, I could listen to him play by himself on an old, out-of-tune upright piano in a dark room with a locked door and still love it. It was so fabulous. There was nothing I could add. I was not the right drummer for him. But then I got a call with Buddy Rich's help. That's another long story I won't go into. But I finally got a call and was connecting with Basie, who was my favorite band of all time. Over the years, whenever Mel and I were in a city where the Basie band was playing, we tried to make their last set after we were done. And Basie would show up on some of the places that we would perform with Mel in New York and a few other places. So we had a connection there. And I had called and left messages about I would love to work with Count Basie. I knew he had a drummer. I knew that they were constantly busy. And I had no idea how this was going to happen. But Buddy put in a couple of nice words for me, very nice words. And I got a call one morning from Basie's road manager, Sonny Cohn. They were in Chicago, and their drummer the night before had been in a very bad car accident. Basie remembered my playing, and I guess he liked it because he told Sonny to give me a call. And I grabbed my drums and my one suit and jumped on an airplane and flew to Chicago and set up that night. This is part of my favorite part of this story, is that I set the drums up that night and showed up at the gig early and waited for the band to show up, just all nerves, sweat pouring. I'm doing nothing, but I am scared, you know what. The band shows up. They finally come up. We all get on the bandstand. Basie starts to play. Al Gray, who was sitting next to me, the great trombonist, knew the book. He knew every number of every chart in that book, and he would call out the number when Basie would start an intro. The guys would all scuffle around, get the music up, and Basie would see that we were all ready, and he'd hit the go-ahead cue, and we would hit. So I was lucky in that I knew that night, I knew maybe 5 or 6 of the tunes by heart. The rest of everything I sight read. There was no audition, no warm-up, no playing, no nothing.
I wasn't even sure there was a book for the Basie band. There was a book, right? A drum book?
Oh, there was a book, yeah. There was a lot of stuff missing. I don't know what Sonny Payne had done with some of that, because I know that Sonny never pulled out any music, as far as I could tell, all those years watching the band. But there was a book. Some of it was missing. I still remember we pulled up a tune I'd never heard before by Neil Hefti called Cherry Point. And literally all I had was the last 8 measures of the tune. I didn't know anything until we got to the end of the tune, so I just made it up as we went along. And it seemed to have worked out okay. So basically, literally, from that first night, they hired me for a week and a half, and I stayed for 4.5 years.
Well, I think you must have. It shows you did your homework. When you don't have a chart, you don't know what's up, and you have to go on your ears, and it's trial by fire. That's where all the listening pays off and all the practicing, right?
It sure does. I've been listening to the band for years, and I knew all of those by heart. Corner Pocket, Shiny Stockings, One O'Clock Chump, Whirlybird, even called Whirlybird, which I'd never played in my life, and tried to play that thing that night. And just a lot of things. But I knew them from listening to them for years and years and years.
Hi, this is Michael Vosbein, your host for Drummer Nation, and I do the show as labor of love, but I could use a little help. If you'd like to be a patron of the show, please go to the site patreon.com/drummernation. Help us out. Thanks.
Well, that brings me to my next question. In listening to the band for all those years, there were some seminal drummers that went through that band. For some younger players, let's go back. The very beginning was Papa Joe Jones, right?
Absolutely.
And what would you say he brought to that band?
Oh, well, he brought a freshness and a lightness to the band that was missing in so many other bands. As you know, you're a student of musical history. The drummers back in the swing era, back in the 1930s, based a lot of their playing on rudimental styles and almost European styles. It sounded like marches a lot of times. You're playing a lot of press rolls. And many of the styles that were in traditional in Dixieland were based on rolls. These gentlemen they could roll you right out the door. They were so fantastic. That's one thing that's missing a lot in today's music, or I should say today's drumming. They don't know anything specifically about rolls. Let's not get too technical here, but you had Papa, who transferred a lot of that sound onto a ride rhythm, onto the hi-hat. And by shifting that over to the hi-hat instead of a pounding snare drum, you had the lightness of a couple of cymbals that allowed the band to breathe. And then he wouldn't set up a whole lot of fills, but he would always set up a kick in the proper fashion. So the band, when they came in, would always sounded as an ensemble. That was something I had to learn. It took me a while to really learn how not to play and when not to play. And Basie was totally instrumental in all of that, in making me use my ears and listen to everything. But Papa brought a freshness and a lightness that nobody else had.
Well, you were a natural for that band and made your mark as one of their seminal drummers as you look back over the history of that band. What were some of the other drummers that preceded you who had an influence?
Unfortunately, the very unsung Shadow Wilson, who did some of the great recordings with Count Basie many years ago. One of the most sought after and learned drum licks, drum breaks, is his 3.5 measure drum break on a chart called Queer Street. I've heard other drummers say that that's the closest you'll ever get to a perfect drum break that's ever been recorded. Shadow was a beautiful player with that and very overlooked. Gus Johnson, I just loved. Gus allowed the band to play. Then Sonny Payne came in and just kicked the living, out of the band, set up beautiful shouts and shout choruses, and brought an energy and a drive to that band that they hadn't had before. This is no reflection on Papa or Shadow or Gus or anybody, but he was full of thunder and lightning, and just came in. And at that time, with the what they called the New Testament, the second edition band, whatever you wanted to call it, and all the new arrangements from Neil Hefti and some of the guys coming in, a young Quincy Jones, up and coming, writing things like that, Ernie Wilkins, and all these people, and the band had fantastic arrangements, and Sonny just was all over those. and it was just wonderful. I took a lot of my cues and a lot of my drumming style from Sonny Payne. When I first joined the band, I knew everything that he had played, so we'd get to a certain fill, I'd just play what Sonny had played, and it worked.
I hear that in your playing, but you also brought a newer energy to the music. You mentioned learning a lot from Basie. I contend that if you put somebody in front of a big band, let's say Woody Herman's in front of his band, the next night somebody else stands in front of it, it's a different band. So much of the imprimatur of the band, the sound of the band, the feel, the whole attitude, comes from the man standing in front of it. And they're able to do that, who knows how, just their presence. So what did you learn from Basie when he would stand up in front of the band and kick something off?
Yeah, well, I've got a story for that one. But Basie did not really conduct the band. He never told me what to play, ever. In the 4.5 years I worked with that man personally, he never told me, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Never. He hired professionals to play his music the way that he wanted. And I'd been on the band maybe about a week, and I tapped Sonny Cohn on the shoulder. He rode in on the bus in front of me. And I tapped him on the shoulder one day. We were traveling someplace, and I said, Cup, his nickname was Cup. I said, Cup, Basie hasn't said anything. Am I doing okay? Does he like my playing? Is it all right? And Cup just spread his hands and laughed. He said, he had a nice, wonderful laugh. He said, if Basie doesn't like what you're doing, he'll tell you. And for Basie not to say a word meant that he liked what I was doing. So that's very, very enjoyable. But the story I want to get to very, very quickly, I know
please
do with anything, but you talk about conducting the band. When I was on the band, Bobby Plater, who was our lead alto player, we called him Staff, he would sometimes cut the band off. He would give you the cutoffs and everything like that. Basie would start with his piano. But we had one bit of show business. When people wanted to hear April in Paris, Basie would get up and walk out to the front of the band and give the downbeat. And then we were off and swinging, and Basie's, moving his arms back and forth. What wasn't really known is that Basie would give us the downbeat, and then we would just take the tempo that we wanted to take. And he followed whatever the beat was that we gave him. But show business-wise, it looked so great. Basie's out there conducting his band, and people loved it. So,
Our band was listening. Woody's band was that way, right? Many a drummer was hung out to dry. Many drummers were hung out to dry because Woody would kick off a tempo and it had nothing to do with where the band was going to play.
That's true.
And you had to know that ahead of time when you were hung out to dry. So let's talk about some of the sidemen in that great band, especially Freddie Green. For people who don't know, Freddie played like a Dutch string guitar. He played downstroke quarter notes forever on that band. And every drummer, every rhythm section player cites what a tremendous influence he was on the time field as a rhythm section player. How was that? Was that like a hand in a glove with Freddie Green?
It was tough at first because Freddie's sense of time was so distinct that it was kind of hard for me to get used to that. Specifically when Basie would start a tempo that was in a different kind of a pocket that I was used to. A lot of times we would do a tune that I felt if we would just play this a little faster, I'd be comfortable. Or if we just played this a little slower, I'd be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie Green and Basie would put that right in a slot and it would stay there. And it was uncomfortable for me for a long time until I got used to it. And I was scared to death of Freddie Green, but he was invaluable with my learning where a groove was. And he literally had, as you're saying, he almost had total control on that band, especially the rhythm section, as to where that tempo was going to be. True story, the first year I was on the band, we, by the time we had finished up the entire year, we were taking most of the month of December off. And then we were going to come back at some point in January and start back on the road again. And we started back, and it's Freddie Green. The first night, and it sounded strange, we're playing and there's no Freddie Green up there playing that guitar. But the second night that happened, the third night there's no Freddie Green. So I asked Basie, him, one of his nicknames we had for him was Chief.
Mm-hmm.
So I just asked him, I said, Chief, where's Freddie? And Basie said, oh, he's down in Florida playing golf. which he could do. If he wanted to stay off for a few days and play golf, Basie let him because, I mean, that was Freddie Green. And there was a slight pause for a moment, and then Basie told me, he said, now maybe we can play some of my tempos.
So that really tells you who was calling the shots there.
Listen to some of the recordings of Little Darlin', and you'll hear Basie play any kind of a tempo going into that introduction, but then he'll play ba 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 da da da, you know, sort of a little thing on the piano, and he'll set the tempo up. You can hear it for maybe 2 beats. Freddie comes in with those 5 notes, and the tempo is completely changed. And the band goes where Freddie Green put the tempo.
Who was some of the other sidemen on that band with you?
Oh, well, Al Gray, I told you about Al Gray, the great trombonist, plunger trombone. There was nobody better at a plunger trombone and growl and showmanship, too. Freddie, Al would stand out in front of the band and play fantastic solos, but he would sell that solo with a lot of body language. And the crowd ate it up. They just loved it. And he was fantastic. Jimmy Forrest was in the tenor chair at the time. He was the featured tenor soloist. For a lot of people that don't remember, Jimmy, he was a great, great player and a great composer. He wrote Night Train, that old, wonderful chestnut that was one of his main claims to fame. And I loved when he was playing. He was great. John Williams was on baritone, saxophone at that point. We had a number of different lead trumpet players, though. When I joined the band, Liv Viviano, the great Viviano, was on lead trumpet. Lynn worked with Woody Herman's band, worked a lot with Buddy Rich's band. And
with Maynard, too, right?
Huh?
Maynard, too.
Maynard, he sure did. We had some other wonderful lead trumpet players. Dave Stahl, I think Dave is down around Philadelphia or somewhere in Pennsylvania now, leading his own big band. Great lead player. There were a number of fantastic players in the band. And then when I went back, talking about fantastic lead trumpet players, Mike Williams, who has been with the Basie band forever and ever at this point, I would have to say, in my opinion, with the exception of maybe Snooky, Mike is the best and finest lead trumpet player they've ever had in that band. And that's saying something.
Against Snooky Young, it sure in the hell is, yeah. Now you did 2 long stints. You were back on the band in the 90s, or for like 10 years, right?
Actually, it was a little over 10 years. Yeah, Grover Mitchell had taken over the band at that point. Mr. Basie had passed away in 1984, and we went through a number of people leading it. Thad Jones. I wasn't on the band when all of this happened. Thad. Originally, I think Eric Dixon and Freddie Green sort of co-led the band. I only saw the band at one point, and Eric did all the announcing. Freddie didn't do anything. I think maybe he just called a couple of tunes. But if you've known anything about Freddie Green, he didn't talk a lot. He didn't have much to say, but when he said something, it was usually important.
He was leading with the instrument, as you said.
It was. He sure.
Well,
later, you had a number of different leaders. Frank Foster, leader of that band for a long time, and then Frank, became sick. He had a stroke. Grover Mitchell took over the band, I think, around 5 or 96. He called me up in 96 and wanted to know if I wanted to rejoin the band. So he said, come on back with the band. I said, okay, but I'm just going to come back with the band as long as I'm having fun. So you can figure on me staying 6 to 8 months. And as you just said, I stayed with the band almost 10 and a half years.
Well, you were perfect on that band. But that's not the only career credit you have. You worked with a lot of singers, man. Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Sammy Davis, Mel Torme, Joe Williams, Ella Fitzgerald, Lena Horne, Rosemary Clooney. Good Lord. What was the key to working with so many great singers?
Support and try not to get in the way. I think a lot of what happened to me, Michael, was that I got lucky. Because I had been with the Basie band, many singers who loved the band wanted to have me work with them or for them from time to time, and it was good because I would listen to them, and I would try not to be a superstar because their name's out front, and I'm just in the backup band, that's it, and I want to give them as much support and musical support as I possibly can without stepping all over their lines or being in the back, so, and we know some people like that, hey, look at me, I'm so great. That will lose a job real fast.
Well, I would add, you're being modest. You were more than lucky. I think every successful drummer has some luck. It was lucky that somebody heard you on a certain night. It was lucky that you ran into this player or that. But you don't build a career on luck. You don't stay on a Basie band for 10 years on luck. You're being modest.
Well, I could say I had incriminating photographs, but that wouldn't be true. But I did. I worked with all these people, and I loved working with them. Alongside, like you were mentioning, Tony Bennett, I worked with. We did a number of jobs with Vic Damone. This great singer, fantastic vocalist. Even did a couple of little shots with a number of other singers out of L.A. Jack Jones.
Another great singer.
Just ran into Jack last year. Very nice man. These people. Incredible singers. I'll tell you about Jack Jones. One night when I was with Tony Bennett, we were going into Harris in Reno, and we were opening the next day. So Tony said, "Hey, come on, let's go see Jack's show." Right. So we're down there, and Jack is performing and singing, and just great. And very quietly, to nobody in particular, Tony leans over and he says, "Oh man, I wish I had those pipes." And that is an enormous compliment from Tony Bennett to Jack Jones.
Oh, absolutely.
Just quietly. That's all he said.
Well, all those guys respected each other in their own brotherhood like the drummers do.
But I still maintain I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. I did not plan to be in the right place at the right time with the right stuff when it happened. But looking back, it's almost like it was planned, and I don't understand that. I don't get it. But
I'm sorry to talk over you. It's not for us to understand. Let's move to present day. Where do you live now? In Texas, right?
Outside of Austin, Texas.
I heard you play at the Elephant Room there some years ago.
That's right.
With a combo. You lead your own combo too, right?
I have a sextet. I have a sextet, a quartet, and a big band. The last time I took the big band out, we did the I Love Jazz Festival down in Brazil 2 years ago, and that was great. I got musicians from all over the country, but I normally lead a sextet. It's the standard lineup: piano, bass, drums, trumpet, trombone, tenor. And then sometimes I'll cut that down to a quartet and use the tenor player, who also may double on alto and doubles on flute. So you get 4 people.
Who writes for the band? Are there charts or is it head arrangements?
Both. We have some charts and some head arrangements. With the sextet, I've got a lot of charts and a few heads that we normally play that we have fun with, like some Duke Ellington things ain't what they used to be, or Take the A Train and stuff. With the quartet, we have more head arrangements than we do charts. And those are fun too, because we're able to delve into other things like Song for My Father, and maybe some light Latin and Latin jazz things, specifically using the flute, a la like Dave Valentine or Herbie Mann.
Well, we'll put those in the show notes, and people can check out your bands. I know that what's the name of your website?
ButchMiles.com. That's it.
Straight and simple.
We just actually overhauled the whole thing, so it's looking pretty good. So I would like to invite everybody to just jump on in, www.butchmiles.com. That's it.
It's a great site. I was just there. So you're also teaching, right?
Yes, sir.
Where do you teach?
State University.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Texas State University in San Marcos. It's about 20 miles south of Austin.
And what is your teaching philosophy or curriculum? I mean, do you use books? You write music out? Is it mostly talking about music concepts, or what's your approach to that?
Well, I'm primarily linked to the jazz department. I do a little bit of work with the percussion department, strangely enough, but I'm not in the percussion department specifically. So I do the drum set lessons for jazz majors. I'm thrilled this semester I've got 3 jazz majors. And we have a, a wonderful program for SRT majors. That stands for Studio Recording Technique. These are where people go to learn how to be a studio engineer and record music. Part of the curriculum for them is that they must put in at least 2 years, 4 semesters of playing an instrument, so they understand something about what it is to make music. You just don't go in and turn on a switch and start pushing buttons and dials and knobs. You have to know something about the background. So I have a lot of SRT students from time to time. I give the lessons on that, and I also teach jazz combo, which is a lot of fun for me. I use various manuals, various teaching manuals, and sometimes I'll handwrite some things out that I want. Sometimes we'll have a lesson that's just right off the top of my head. I'll find out what a student is struggling with, and we'll concentrate on that maybe for the entire lesson. It won't be anything that we have planned for that day. You know, maybe they're in the big band or they're in a combo and they're having a lot of trouble transitioning from letter C to letter D. What do? Well, we make that the lesson. So it's constantly changing.
Well, that's the nature of jazz music too, right? Now, you had a health scare a few years back. How are you?
Oh, how am I? I'm doing good. I'm doing great.
You look terrific.
6 months after the operation, I had a lung transplant.
Well, you look great, and everybody was worried about you, but you're back playing and teaching and everything cool, right?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I just came back a couple of weeks ago from the Vail Jazz Party in Vail, Colorado. Now, that's 8,100 feet up in the mountains, and I was still able to get along okay. I huffed and puffed a little more than normal because of that altitude. I've got one really great lung and one that's just kind of along for the ride. But thanks to modern medicine and a fantastic team in Houston and my own pulmonologist about 5 miles away from my house, I keep on top of everything, and my health is very good.
Terrific. Speaking of jazz parties, are you playing the Newport party this year?
Yep.
Oh, great. I hear it's their last year, too.
Yes, it is. And I have to be there. I was at the very first West Coast Jazz Party back in, I believe it was 1995. I was John and Joe, you know, those two great guys that put on the party. They tell the story. I was the first person they called. And I don't know whether it's a bunch of BS or, you know, just some fun things. But John and Joe both told me that I was the first one that they called, and if I turned them down, they weren't going to have the party.
I'm glad you
accepted the gig.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. That's John McClure and Joe Rothman.
Absolutely.
And I've been to several of those. I'm going to try to make it a point to get to this one and see you there.
Last one, and it's going to feature a big band finishing out every night, and I'm going to be as a tribute. I'm going to be doing a tribute one night to Frankie Cap with the Juggernaut Band. You know, Frankie just passed away. And
dear friend of mine, he just passed away. I'm sorry to hear it.
Yep. So was I. You know, I'd known Frankie for a long time. And over the years, I sat in and played with the Juggernaut Band a few times and just loved it. So they've got me coming in and closing one of the nights with Frankie's Juggernaut Band, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. But I got to tell you, I'm going to miss Frankie. I am really going to miss that man. I sure admired everything.
Me too. I did several interviews with him and got to know him very well. I had dinner at his house one night with Ed Shaughnessy there, which I'll never forget. Telling old stories, listen to those guys, you know. In any event, he'll be missed. He was loved by the drum community, music community. Well, I hope to see you out there in February. I don't want to keep you too much longer. It's a pretty short format, but I always end by saying maybe we can do it again. Would you do it again?
I would be very honored and thrilled. I'd love to.
Well, it's my honor to have you here, Butch. So, I hope to see you that's February usually, right?
Yes, sir. It's usually around the Valentine's Day weekend, somewhere around there.
Okay, well, thanks for doing the show, and thanks for all the info. I'm sure everybody's going to dig it, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Michael, and I appreciate everything you're doing for Drummer Nation.
Thank you. My honor.
This is your host, Michael Vospine, and I'd like to thank our friends at Sabian Cymbals, Sound Synergies, Stanton Moore Drum Academy, and Classic Drummer Magazine. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.